Can one small voice from a crowded city corner travel far enough to stop the world for a moment? Can a boy who owns almost nothing still carry something priceless inside his chest? In the heart of Manila, where jeepneys roar and streetlights flicker like tired stars, a thin boy once stood at the edge of a stage that did not feel meant for him. His name was Juan de la Cruz, 13 years old, quiet, watchful, with eyes that had learned to hide hunger behind soft hope. Beside his memories lived his mother, Maria, a laundry worker with worn hands and a patient smile, strong in spirit but always tired in her bones. There was also Lolo Ernesto, his grandfather, gentle and slow, a man who believed music could keep a heart alive even when life tried to break it. Their home was a narrow room of tin walls and a leaking roof, where rain sounded louder than dreams and nights felt longer than sleep. But inside that small space, something impossible grew. Not money. Not comfort. Not safety. A voice. Juan did not know where it came from. Maybe from the prayers his mother whispered at dawn. Maybe from the old songs his grandfather hummed while staring at nothing. All he knew was that when he sang, the noise of Manila faded. The shouting vendors disappeared. The traffic softened. Even the fear inside his chest stepped back for a while. Still, dreams are heavy for boys who carry water buckets instead of school bags. Stages like America's Got Talent belong to shining people, not children who counted coins before buying rice. So how did this boy, laughed at for his worn shoes and shaking hands, end up under lights bright enough to blind fear itself? How did a voice born in poverty reach the ears of Simon Cowell? And what happened in those few minutes that made the world stop, and a golden button fall like a miracle from the sky? Juan de la Cruz was 13, but his eyes carried the quiet weight of someone much older. He was small for his age, with thin arms and careful steps, as if the world might break if he moved too fast. Every morning, before the sun fully rose over Manila's crowded roofs, he woke to the sound of tricycles and distant vendors calling out their goods. His first habit was always the same. He folded his blanket neatly, even when sleep had barely touched him, as though order could protect him from the chaos outside. Juan rarely spoke unless needed. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he had learned that silence cost less than words. At school, his uniform was always clean but faded, the color washed away by too many scrubs in cold water. He sat at the back, not to hide, but to observe. He watched other children laugh freely, wondering how it felt to carry no worry in the chest. After class, while others ran home to play, Juan walked to the public water pump. He filled plastic containers, one by one, his thin fingers turning red from the cold metal handle. He counted steps when he walked. It was another habit. Numbers made him feel in control when life did not. Inside, Juan carried two feelings at once. Fear, that tomorrow might be harder than today. And hope, small but stubborn, like a candle that refused to go out even in the wind. At night, when the city grew quieter, he sat by the small window of their tin house. He hummed softly, not to perform, not to impress, but to breathe. Music was the only place where his shoulders relaxed. Where he was not poor. Not tired. Not afraid. Just a boy with a voice, trying to understand why his heart felt bigger than his world. Life did not change for Juan in one loud moment. It changed quietly, the way light fades at the end of day without anyone noticing the exact second. His mother's cough had started as something small. A soft sound in the mornings, brushed away with a tired smile and a wave of her hand. But weeks passed, and the sound grew deeper, heavier, like something stuck where air should be. Maria still worked. She still washed piles of clothes for other families, her hands in cold water until her fingers turned pale. But each night she sat down slower. Each breath seemed borrowed, not owned. Juan noticed everything. He noticed how she paused before standing. How she pressed her chest when she thought no one was looking. How her smile lasted shorter than before. Fear entered their home like an uninvited guest who refused to leave. Medicine cost more than they had. Doctor visits belonged to another world, one with doors they could not open. Juan began skipping small things. He ate less so his mother could have more. He walked instead of taking cheap transport, even when his legs shook. He sang less. Not because he stopped loving music, but because guilt wrapped around his voice. How could he dream of stages and lights while his mother struggled just to breathe? At night, when Maria slept, he lay awake listening to the sound of her breathing, counting the pauses between each one. Every silence felt too long. Loneliness grew inside him, even in the same room. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being helpless. He was just a boy. Too young to earn enough. Too small to fight fate. Too scared to lose the only person who held his world together. And for the first time, one wondered if dreams were a luxury meant only for people who could afford hope. The turning point did not arrive with celebration. It came on an ordinary afternoon, heavy with heat and tiredness. Juan had just returned from the water pump, shoulders aching, when he saw his grandfather sitting outside their home, holding an old radio that had not worked in years. Lolo Ernesto rarely touched it. It had belonged to Juan's late grandmother, a memory more than an object. But that day, the old man turned its broken knob again and again, as if hoping time itself might turn back. Then, through a burst of static, a clear voice slipped out. An announcement. A talent competition. Auditions in Manila. Winners could earn money, exposure, and a chance to be seen by the world beyond the city's tight streets. The radio crackled, but the message stayed. Lolo Ernesto looked at Juan, eyes brighter than they had been in months. Hope moved between them without words. Juan's first feeling was fear. Big stages belonged to confident children, not boys who counted coins before meals. But then he heard it. His mother coughing inside the house. Long, painful. Unstoppable. The sound cut deeper than fear ever could. Something shifted in his chest. For the first time, his voice did not feel like a dream. It felt like a tool. A chance. A bridge between what was and what could be. That night, he stood outside under a flickering streetlight. Instead of humming softly, he sang fully, letting the sound rise without apology. Neighbors slowed their steps. Windows opened. For a few minutes, the narrow street felt wider. Juan realized something simple and terrifying. If he stayed quiet, nothing would change. But if he tried, even failure would mean he had fought for his mother, not just waited for life to decide. And in that small decision, made under a weak light and a tired sky, Juan's world quietly turned in a new direction. Preparing for the audition did not make life easier. In many ways, it made everything heavier. Juan now carried two weights instead of one. His family's survival, and a dream that refused to stay small. He practiced in places where no one would chase him away. Behind markets after closing hours. Near the shoreline where the wind stole half his voice. Under bridges where echoes answered back. Sometimes people listened. Sometimes they laughed. Both sounds heard in different ways. There were days his voice cracked from hunger. Days his legs shook so badly he had to sit before finishing a song. But each struggle carved something stronger inside him. He began to understand that talent was not just a gift. It was endurance. It was singing even when the body begged to rest. At home, his mother grew weaker. Juan stopped seeing himself as a child. He learned to cook simple meals, to wash clothes, to hide worry behind gentle smiles. Every time fear told him he was too small, he remembered her hands, rough from years of work. If she could endure for him, he could endure for her. Doubt still visited at night. It whispered that the stage would swallow him. That judges would not see him, only his worn shoes and shaking hands. But another voice grew louder. A quiet belief. He was not singing to impress strangers. He was singing to fight for time. For medicine. For breath. For one more morning where his mother could wake without pain. Slowly, Juan changed. The shy boy who hid at the back of the classroom began standing straighter. Not because fear disappeared, but because love stood beside it. And love, he discovered, was heavier than fear, but much stronger. Some people believe miracles fall from the sky, sudden and shining. But Juan's journey showed something quieter. Miracles often begin in small rooms with leaking roofs, in hearts that choose hope when fear would be easier. His story was never only about a stage or a golden button. It was about a boy who refused to let poverty decide the size of his dream. It was about a mother whose silent sacrifices became the strength in her son's voice. It was about love turning into courage when life gave no other choice. The world often looks at success and sees only the moment under bright lights. It forgets the long walks, the empty plates, the nights filled with worry instead of sleep. It forgets the children who grow up too fast, carrying responsibilities their small shoulders never asked for. Juan's voice carried more than melody. It carried hunger, hope, fear, and faith all at once. And that is why it reached hearts. Because pain, when turned into purpose, becomes something powerful. His journey reminds us that being poor does not mean being empty. Sometimes, those with the least possessions carry the greatest strength inside. Dreams are not reserved for the comfortable. They belong to anyone brave enough to protect them, even when the world laughs first. Every person listening has their own silent battle. Their own fear. Their own impossible dream. Juan's story whispers something simple but true. You do not need to be the loudest. You do not need perfect conditions. You only need one reason strong enough to keep going. And sometimes, that reason is love. When love leads, even the smallest voice can travel far enough to change a life, and maybe even touch the world.